on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about hunters and trappers in the American West, which you can use to create a historically accurate hunter or trapper character in Red Dead Online. Let's get started. Folks in the 1800s became hunters and trappers for a variety of reasons. Some were motivated by simple necessity to procure food for themselves, their families, or others. Some were drawn by the prospect of wealth through the acquisition of furs and pelts. Then there were those whose primal souls were stirred by the call of the wild, the majesty of the outdoors, and the thrill of the hunt. While every hunter had his own motivations, one of my favorite explanations came from the great Theodore Roosevelt in his superb book, The Wilderness Hunter, detailing his hunting adventures in the American West. In it, he writes, quote, "In hunting, the finding and killing of the game is, after all, but a part of the whole. The free, self-reliant, adventurous life, with its rugged and stalwart democracy, the wild surroundings, the grand beauty of the scenery, the chance to study the ways and habits of the woodland creature, all these unite to give to the career of the wilderness hunter its peculiar charm. The chase is among the best of all national pastimes. It cultivates that vigorous manliness for the lack of which in a nation, as in an individual, the possession of no other qualities can possibly atone. No one but he who has partaken thereof can understand the keen delight of hunting in lonely lands. For him is the joy of the horse well ridden and the rifle well held. For him the long days of toil and hardship resolutely endured and crowned at the end with triumph. In after years, there shall come forever to his mind the memory of endless prairies shimmering in the bright sun, the vast snow-clad wastes lying desolate under gray skies, of the melancholy marshes, of the rush of mighty rivers, of the breath of the evergreen forest in summer, of the crooning of ice-armored pines at the touch of the winds of winter, of cataracts roaring between hoar mountain masses, all the innumerable sights and sounds of the wilderness, of its immensity and mystery, and of the silences that brood in its still depths." For those that sought to enrich themselves through hunting and trapping, there was certainly money to be made. Fur prices fluctuated depending upon the animal, the time period, fashion trends, and more. Consider the beaver. At the height of the mountain man era in the 1820s and 30s, beaver pelts fetched $6 a piece, the modern equivalent of $133. By the 1840s, prices fell to around $3 per pelt, or about $67 today. Exacerbating this decline was the depletion of the beaver population from over-trapping. By then, it simply wasn't worth the effort to trap beaver at that price when it was difficult enough even finding beaver to trap. Unsurprisingly, this reduced the number of trappers in the West from an estimated 600 who worked the region in the 1820s to just 75 trappers by the 1840s. Over the following decades, however, the beaver population began to rebound, and while the market for beaver hats was small, the pelts were still used in trimming coats and making earmuffs. As a result, by 1898, the time period of Red Dead Online, the average beaver pelt fetched $5, the modern equivalent of about $165. A fine price, but again, there still weren't enough of them to make a full-time profession of it. After the decline of the beaver, fur traders shifted their focus to the bison, whose robes were in great demand out east. In time, however, they too went the way of the beaver, prompting traders and trappers to target a variety of species in order to make ends meet. By 1898, the most prized pelt was a silver fox, which could fetch as much as $100, or in today's money, about $3,300. In his book, Canadian Wilds, Martin Hunter states that Hudson's Bay Company trading posts were buying silver fox furs at the time for as much as $335, or $11,000 in today's money. He even tells the story of accompanying a Native American named Wasakijik, who, while inspecting his trap line, found a silver fox in one of them. He wrote, quote, "What a pleased look the Indian wore as he stood there, evidently oblivious to my presence for the moment, as he gazed down on the most valuable skin it was possible for him to trap. What a number of necessities and luxuries this would procure for his family." The fact that we only get a few bucks for them in Red Dead Online is terribly disappointing. Personally, I'd love for Rockstar to jack up the price and reduce the spawn rate, replicating the excitement one would have felt in the past when they were lucky enough to acquire one. Other prize pelts from 1898 include black bears, up to $25 per skin, otters up to $22, and martens, $20. If you're interested in knowing more about the historical prices of furs in 1898 compared to Red Dead Online, I made an entire video about the topic. It's called The Historical Accuracy of Hunting and Trading in Red Dead Online, and I definitely recommend you check it out. While on the subject of prices, I should probably address a common misunderstanding that I see all the time in the comments. That is, folks assuming that the pelts of predators, like cougars or grizzly bears, would be worth more money because of the danger in hunting the animal. In truth, the value had nothing to do with that, or its rarity for that matter, but rather the quality of the coat. Beaver, for instance, were common and not dangerous to hunt, but brought a solid price because of the thickness and color of the pelt. Cougars, on the other hand, were dangerous to hunt, but their fur is of much poor quality, being close to a deer, moose, or elk in texture, so they simply weren't worth the trouble. Likewise, black bear pelts fetched higher prices than grizzlies, because of their color and quality, even though they're more common and less dangerous to hunt than grizz. It's also important to note that, generally speaking, the more northern a fur-bearing animal is, the better the pelt's quality. This even holds true within species. We see this in an 1898 journal called the Fur Trade Review, Volume 26, which clearly shows higher prices paid for animals taken in more northern regions and lower prices for those taken in more southern areas. Furs were also worth more when taken in the winter versus summer, which again is reflected in the Fur Trade Review's 1898 prices. When it came to beaver, otter, mink, and muskrats, their natural surroundings also had a primary effect on the color of their hair, which also affected price. In clear, cold water lakes, skins were of a deep, glossy black, and of the highest quality, while those from muddy lakes were light-colored and of lower quality. Martin Hunter writes in Canadian Wilds, quote, "Having studied this in my own hunting and trapping, I've often surprised an Indian when trading his skins by saying, quote, 'You trapped this and this skin in a clear water lake,' and he admitted it is true." Personally, I'd love to see some of this added to the game, perhaps something as simple as the pelts of beaver, muskrats, wolves, bears, and so forth, taken in the northern areas of the map, bringing slightly higher prices than those taken elsewhere, and differentiating them with a darker tone. In my opinion, little additions like this would really improve the hunting experience in the game, and if you feel the same, let me know down in the comments. Being a hunter and trapper was hard, dirty work. Martin Hunter writes, quote, "Animals don't come to the camp door and ask to be skinned. On the contrary, trapping, to do it right, is hard work. And when the real day's work of tramping through swamps and over mountains seems done, there's yet much more work for the cold, wet, and hungry men to do at the camp, cutting and carrying the night's firewood, cooking the supper, drying their clothes for the morrow, patching broken moccasins, and skinning and stretching pelts they may have secured that day." Now, lest we forget, many of these animals were still very much alive when the trapper came back to check his lines. In such cases, they needed to be dispatched. The process differed a bit by animal, but smaller game like foxes, raccoons, and so forth were put out of their misery by beating in their brains or breaking their backs with a pole. If that sounds unpleasant, you can take some comfort in knowing that most trappers, including Martin Hunter, found this particularly disagreeable. Native Americans and those who learned trapping from them took a different approach called poling hearts. According to sources, a native, or trapper trained by them, approached the caught animal with a hefty forked pole, but instead of beating the creature with it, he used it to pin the animal's head to the ground so he could grab it by the neck. Once a solid grip was gained, he'd lift the animal off the ground with his left hand and use his right to feel for the heart below the bottom rib. Quote, "When the animal feels the grip tightening on his throat, the sense of strangulation causes the heart to jump down and up in the body in the most violent manner. This the hunter seizes at one of the downward pumps, catches it between the thumb and fingers of his right hand, then pulling the body in one direction and the heart in the other, the heartstrings snap. The animal gives a convulsive quiver, and you chuck him down dead." All trappers, both native and non-native, simply shot any dangerous animals they caught, such as mountain lions or bears. To preserve the quality of the fur, a bullet was put through the ear at close range, passing clear through the head and killing it instantly. Hunting and trapping was dangerous work, and there's no shortage of newspaper articles to prove it. Of course, hunters and trappers were killed by mountain lions, wolves, snakes, bears, and other creatures, but it wasn't just the animals one needed to worry about. Eric Jay Dolin writes in his superb book, Fur, Fortune, and Empire, that prior to the reservation period, natives were far more dangerous to early mountain men than any animal. He writes that, quote, "By and large, mountain men got along well with many of the natives they encountered, or at least avoided physical confrontations." That said, Dolin writes that, quote, "There were some Indians who were consistently hostile to the mountain men, including the Blackfeet, whose anger at the encroachment of white trappers and explorers had not abated since the days of Lewis and Clark. But the most dangerous and persistent foes of the mountain men were the Atsina of the prairies, who were close allies of the Blackfeet. Whenever mountain men and the Atsina crossed paths, tensions rose and fights often ensued." But again, this is well prior to the reservation period. By 1898, the year in which Red Dead Online is set, the dangers faced by hunters and trappers had taken alternative forms, many of which had always been part of the risks associated with the profession. For instance, some hunters and trappers became caught in traps. One 1892 article in the Roanoke Times illustrates the dangers well. It's titled, "Awful Fate of a Hunter Caught in a Bear Trap, He Slowly Starves to Death." It tells of a man named David Allen who had, quote, "evidently been in the act of setting the trap when by some means it closed upon his wrists with a vice-like grip. Unable to release himself and with no hope of making his voice heard in that vast wilderness, he suffered the most excruciating tortures until starvation and exposure combined ended his existence." Another man named D.N. Hahn died when setting up his own deer-killing booby trap. That's why I said setting booby traps. The article states that, quote, he had loaded both barrels of his gun and to the triggers attached a string connected with the bait which he had set for the deer. Hearing the report of a gun, Han ran to the trap supposing that both barrels had been discharged. He went directly to the bait, struck the string, and instantly the other barrel of the gun was discharged. The charge blew away the fleshy part of one of his legs, severing the main artery, and he bled to death before assistance came to him. Some hunters died of exposure or simply froze to death. One such case is illustrated in an 1885 article from the Indianapolis Journal. It states that a hunter named Frank Hartwell was, quote, found frozen to death. His faithful dog was found lying beside him while he held his gun in his arms across his lap, being in a sitting posture. First off, that's a damn fine dog. Second, this is eerily reminiscent of our dear friend Hatchet Jack from the greatest movie of all time, Jeremiah Johnson. If you haven't seen it yet, pause this video and go watch it now. Some hunters accidentally shot themselves, a lamentable occurrence to be sure. Take the case of a young hunter by the name of George Newcomb. According to the article, quote, he and two companions were in a boat, and in stepping ashore, the boat moved away several feet, and in trying to draw it in, he used his muzzle-loading shotgun, placing the stock in the bow of the boat and drawing the barrel toward him. The cap was snapped and the discharge took effect in his neck, cutting both jugular veins and causing instant death. Some hunters were killed by landowners for trespassing on private property. Others were killed by other hunters, such as this article where one man mistook another for a turkey and put a bullet through his brain. A hunter named Frank Pope was killed after he, quote, treed a coon and proceeded to cut down the tree so the dogs could get at him. The tree in falling struck and crushed Pope and he died soon afterwards. Another hunter named James Epps died after he treed a possum, climbed up to get it, and, quote, by some means lost his hold, fell to the ground and broke his neck. Some hunters drowned when fetching dead ducks from rivers, while others perished when their boats capsized in lakes. Some hunters were even killed by lightning. Suffice it to say, hunting and trapping certainly had their dangers, but for most men those dangers were often outweighed by the perks. In W.T. Hamilton's excellent book, My 60 Years on the Plains, Trapping, Trading, and Indian Fighting, the author writes, quote, I have often been asked why we exposed ourselves to such danger. My answer has always been that there is a charm in the life of a free mountaineer, from which one cannot free himself after he once has fallen under its spell. And it was this spell that drew some hunters and trappers into life so strongly that they became a bit too wild for their own good. Take for instance this article from the Albuquerque Daily Citizen, where cowboys lassoed what they called a genuine wild man, an old trapper that reverted to his primal nature. And to be clear, he's not the only one. I found dozens of such cases stretching from the swamps of Florida to the forests of Alaska. Theodore Roosevelt writes of meeting an elderly trapper in his book The Wilderness Hunter. He describes him by saying, quote, his existence has been one of excitement, adventure, and restless roaming. He had no kin, no ties of any kind. He would accept no help, for his wants were very few, and he was utterly self-reliant. He got meat, clothing, and bedding from the antelope and deer he killed. The spare hides and venison he bartered for what little else he needed. So he built himself his teepee in one of the most secluded parts of the Badlands, where he led the life of a solitary hunter, awaiting in grim loneliness the death which he knew to be near at hand. In his book Canadian Wilds, author Martin Hunter warns men to be mindful of slipping too deeply into the hunter and trapper life that they become lonely hermits. He writes, quote, man was never intended to live alone, and a trapper who passes the best part of his life far away from his fellow man becomes selfish, crabbed, and morose. No matter how successful he may have been in his hunting years, when old age comes, his last moments are generally passed alone in some miserable shanty, covered in dirty and musty old clothes and blankets, no one to pass him a drink of water or wipe the death sweat from his brow. So dive into the life, gentlemen, but not so deep that you lose yourself. While hunting methods differed depending upon the terrain and the animal being hunted, most hunters utilized an approach called still hunting. This involved walking stealthily through an animal's habitat and stopping frequently, often holding still for long periods of time, in order to scan and listen for game. Once located, still hunters carefully stalk their prey, using the wind to their advantage and blending into the environment in order to get close enough to take a solid shot. When hunting in a group, folks often employed another technique called a deer drive, though it could be utilized to hunt other animals as well. In practice, a group of hunters divided themselves into two groups, with one acting as drivers and the other as posters. Drivers spread out across the field or woods and pushed game out of cover, while posters took position at the end of cover to intercept game pushed out by the drivers. While some sources from the 1800s mention drivers being mounted, most deer drives were carried out on foot. I've had many viewers ask me if it was common for folks to hunt while mounted on horseback. In short, it depended on the time period, the terrain, and what you were hunting. hunting. The history of mounted hunts goes back thousands of years, with some of the earliest depictions coming from a group of Assyrian reliefs called the lion hunts of Ashokan Farewell. Hunting from horseback was particularly useful when going after dangerous game, as it made the hunter more mobile and less exposed. Such advantages explain why natives hunted bison from horseback. When not hunting dangerous game, most hunters rode horses to the hunting grounds, where they would dismount and engage in still hunting. Even in stumbling upon an animal while out riding, most hunters dismounted their horses to take careful, steady aim, rather than firing from horseback, like many folks do in Read That Online. Such practices had much to do with the concept of fair chase, that is, hunting in an ethical, sportsmanlike manner that does not give the hunter improper or unfair advantages over the wildlife he's hunting. Theodore Roosevelt was an ardent supporter of the concept, writing in The Wilderness Hunter that, quote, killing a deer from a boat while the poor animal is swimming in the water or on snowshoes as it flounders helplessly in the deep drifts can only be justified on a plea of hunger. This is also true of lying in wait at a lick. Whoever indulges in any of these methods, save from necessity, is a butcher, pure and simple, and has no business in the company of true sportsmen. We see this philosophy played out during Roosevelt's 1902 bear hunting trip to Mississippi. After failing to shoot a bear for several days, Roosevelt's hunting guide, Holt Collier, quote, jumped from his horse and, clubbing his rifle, knocked Mr. Bear over with a blow on the head. A messenger was sent back for the president. Then Holt roped the bear and tied him to a tree. When the president arrived, he would neither shoot it nor permit it to be shot. Put it out of its misery, said he to Mr. Parker, and the latter ended its life with his knife. While there's nothing within Read That Online that requires us to utilize the ethics of fair chase, I still try and hold myself to the standards of it. Sure, it reduces the quantity of game I procure, but it reminds me to slow down and enjoy the hunt. To me, there's also just a purity to it, a sense of honor gleamed in doing things the right way and earning the kill. So give it a try. Dismount your horse and walk quietly into the forest. Pause sporadically to listen for game, look for sign, and glass the hills. When you find your quarry, carefully maneuver yourself for the perfect shot. And when the moment is right, take it. One popular misconception is that hunters and trappers work solo. Historically, however, most were part of an outfit, that is, a group of men hired by a fur trading company or group of investors to trap a particular area for a period of time. The company would supply the men with traps, food, and transportation. In exchange, half of what they caught went to the company, while the other half was theirs to keep. Others chose to take a set salary and hand over all their furs at the end of the season. A variety of similar terms also existed. Additionally, there were also free trappers, independent men who bought their own equipment and hunted and trapped what they pleased, where they pleased, and when they pleased. Now, all that said, most hunters and trappers, regardless of belonging to an outfit or being free trappers, still operated in small groups, not solo. According to the 1837 book, The Adventures of Captain Bonneville, USA, in the Rocky Mountains and the Far West, quote, two trappers commonly go together for the purposes of assistance and support. A larger party could not easily escape the eyes of the Indians. It should therefore come as little surprise that even the most famous mountain men of the past, such as Kit Carson, Jim Bridger, and Jedediah Smith, were nearly always partnered up with fellow hunters and trappers. We also see this in Jeremiah Johnson, when the struggles of hunting and trapping solo prompts him to fall in with Bear Claw Chris Lapp, and later with the unpredictable Del Q. The firearms used by hunters differed greatly by the period in which they operated and the game they intended to hunt. During the Mountain Man era, hunters and trappers preferred Hawken 30 or even better, Hawken 50 caliber rifles. The same gun Jeremiah Johnson famously pried from the cold dead hands of Hatchet Jack. Anyone who regularly watches my channel knows that I've been very outspoken about Rockstar adding them to the game, and I see no harm in them doing so. By 1898, this antique single-fire black powder rifle would have been entirely obsolete compared to available firearms at the time. Still, folks like myself don't care about that. We just want to live out our Mountain Man fantasies alone in the grizzlies. So give us a Hawken, we'll be on our way. I always thought that a neat way Rockstar could add the Hawken and other antique firearms into the game would be to convert the tent camp on the edge of Valentine into a trade fair once a month. In addition to customized antique firearms, NPC vendors could sell unique knives, clothing, hats, food, and other miscellaneous items that don't make sense to order from a catalog or purchase in a store. There should only be a limited number of each item available so they feel rare, and the offerings should be rotated to prevent things from going stale. Another gun that should be available but isn't is the 1874 Sharps rifle. Not that many of us want to eradicate the bison from the American West, but if we did, historically, this would be the gun to do it with. Of course, hunting bison wasn't particularly difficult. In 1872, a Topeka newspaper observed that, quote, men come from London, cockneys, fops, and nobles, and from all parts of the Republic to enjoy what they call sport, when no danger is incurred and no skill required. I see no more sport in shooting a buffalo than in shooting an ox, nor so much danger as there is in hunting Texas cattle. While hunting bison might not have required tremendous accuracy, the Sharps rifle still offered it. One need look no farther than the Battle of Adobe Walls in 1874, where a young hunter named Billy Dixon shot a mounted Indian from 1,538 yards away. In My 60 Years on the Plains, Trapping, Trading, and Indian Fighting, W.T. Hamilton talks about mountain men transitioning from the Hawken to the Sharps rifle. He writes, quote, 6 of us had traded our Hawken rifles for Sharps rifles, brought in by immigrants. These were the first Sharps rifles we had seen, and we found them most effective weapons. They were equal in accuracy to our old rifles and far superior in effectiveness. Since we don't have this option either, then I read that online, the rifle I most recommend for hunters is the Lancaster Repeater, which historically is the Winchester Model 1866. This gun and its subsequent iterations became legendary as the gun that won the West. Winchesters were Theodore Roosevelt's favorite hunting rifles, having more than 20 of them in his personal collection. On his legendary African safari hunt, Winchester provided his party with 15 crates of rifles, ammunition, and spare parts. Roosevelt himself carried a Winchester Model 1895 throughout it. In his book, Hunting Trips of a Ranchman, Roosevelt writes, quote, the Winchester stocked inside to suit myself is by all odds the best weapon I ever had. Beyond Roosevelt, Winchester rifles were famously issued to the Texas Rangers, carried by the notorious Apache leader Geronimo, and were instrumental in the Sioux victory over the 7th Cavalry at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Now, if this pedigree isn't enough to convince you to embrace a Lancaster Repeater, I don't know what will. For sidearm, the most popular pistol was far and away the Colt Single Action Army, which in Read That Online is the cattleman's revolver. Most were chambered in .45 caliber, but in 1877, Colt began manufacturing many in .44 caliber, which they called the Colt Frontier. This change allowed the gun to use the same ammunition as the incredibly popular Winchester Model 1873 rifle, which is a pretty sweet setup. Later, when Winchester added .38 and .32 calibers to their 1873 rifles, Colt followed suit, offering their pistols in both calibers as well, giving folks the opportunity to use interchangeable ammunition between their rifles and pistols. Like firearms, the clothing worn by hunters and trappers differed greatly by the period in which they operated. As many of you know, I prefer to play as a classic mountain man, even though the game is set several decades later. If you're looking to do so in the game, you'll want to consult my previous video, How to Create a Historically Accurate Mountain Man Character in Read That Online. For those of you looking to craft a character more in line with the setting of the game, I put together a variety of outfits to get you started. Outfit number 1 is based on an 1889 photo I came across of an elk hunter in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Personally, it's one of my favorite hunting getups. To create it and Read That Online, you start with the worn brown stovepipe square-toe boots, brown clerk pants worn over the boots, and an optional cartridge belt worn around the waist. Up top, you'll want the green bib shirt, tan cotton suspenders, and the tan neckerchief. Cap it all off with a brown military scout hat. Outfit number 2 is based on a man with the awesome name of Coyote Smith, a hunter and trapper who lived near Glen Rock, Wyoming around the turn of the century. Smith's outfit stands out as quite unique for the period. To get his look, you'll want the worn black stovepipe square-toe boots and the gray cuff town pants, which are interestingly patched very similar to Smith's, an added bonus of historical authenticity. Up top, you want the off-white crossback suspenders, blue work shirt, and the black Bartley cap, which isn't perfect, but close enough. Outfit number 3 is based on an anonymous photo taken in Boulder, Colorado of a group of hunters from the late 1800s. 3 of the 5 men are dressed similarly. I like the look of this outfit quite a bit, particularly for hunting in more northern areas. To put this together and Read That Online, you want the worn stovepipe square-toe boots, the worn gray military half chaps, and the gray studded pants. Up top, you want the black Donegal sweater, the tan Antoine jacket, and the brown military scout hat. You can also make some simple variations of this one by changing the color of your Donegal sweater and pairing it up with something like the Everman's jacket. Mix and match these combos a bit and you might find something you really like. Outfit number 4 is based on an 1877 photo of a hunter, trapper, and army guy named Jack Bean, one of the few depictions of hunters from the period that I could locate where the man isn't wearing cowboy boots. This is a solid outfit and can easily be modified in a number of ways. To start, you'll want the brown Dunstan boots and the brown slack pants. Up top, go with the gray bib shirt and the light blue cotton suspenders. For a hat, go with the brown military scout hat. From here, mix up the colors of your bib shirt, slack pants, and suspenders, and in doing so, you'll create some pretty nice variations of this one. Outfit number 5 is inspired by an anonymous photograph, likely from the 1870s, depicting what looks to be, based on their rifles, a group of buffalo hunters. We're going to model our outfit after the man on the lower right, as his attire is nearly identical as several other buffalo hunter outfits I found from the period. Now this outfit can be used by any hunters, not just bison. Start with the worn black stovepipe square toe boots and the worn black studded pants tucked into the boots. You can add the cartridge belt as well, but it's not necessary. Up top, go with the black bibbed shirt and the green tinged military scout hat. Outfit number 6 is just generic attire worn by many men across the West during the 1800s, including hunters. It was simple, comfortable, inexpensive, and it got the job done. Start with the worn brown stovepipe square toe boots and the brown clerk pants. Up top, you want the off-white collar overshirt, tan suspenders, and the brown military scout hat. This outfit also looks great and remains historically accurate with several colors of the everyday overshirt. So mix and match as you please. Outfit number 7 is based off a photo of Frederick Sailou, the man Theodore Roosevelt called the greatest big game hunter in the world, which, coming from Roosevelt, is a damn fine compliment. To get his look and read that online, we'll start from the ground up. First, you'll want the worn black Dunstan boots, the worn gray military half shafts, the worn striped padded saddle work pants, and the black cartridge belt. Up top, you'll want the white everyday shirt and a tan military scout hat. Outfit number 8 is your quintessential poor farmer that hunts in his spare time. Well, this one might not get you excited, it is definitely historically accurate. Plus, I know there's always a handful of folks out there that just want to know this stuff. To get you started, you'll want the worn brown stovepipe square toe boots and the black overalls. Now, I know they don't look black, but that's the color. Up top, you'll want the white everyday shirt, the gray everyman jacket, and the brown stalker hat. Outfit number 9 is based on Holt Collier, the man who famously clubbed and lassoed the bear in Roosevelt's Mississippi hunt. Holt was born into slavery, fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War, and afterwards became the greatest bear hunter in American history, credited with over 3,000 black bear kills. To get his look and read that online, you'll want the worn black Dunstan boots, the black military half shafts, these are optional, and the cream slack pants. Up top, you want the white everyday shirt, the worn black roller jacket, and the brown military slouch hat. Last but not least, outfit number 10 depicts the famed big game hunter and mountain man Ben Lilly, who was the most prolific mountain lion hunter in American history, killing between 600 and 1,000 of them. There are also authenticated reports of him killing bear and cougar with nothing but his knife, which is pretty badass. Like Collier, Lilly also served as a hunting guide for Theodore Roosevelt. Now let's break down his look and read that online. Start with the worn brown Dunstan boots and the striped gray slack pants. Up top, go with the white horsefall overshirt and a pair of off-white suspenders. Cap it all off with the brown tobacco hat. As always, feel free to mix and match different components to create a historically accurate look that you love. And until next time, keep your nose in the wind and your eye along the skyline, and watch your top knots, pilgrims.
Yep. Watch yarn.
Thank you folks for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, if you want to farther support my efforts, you can do so on Patreon, or you can buy some gear for the Modern Frontier for the Man vs. History Outfitter Shop. Thanks again for watching. You folks have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time. Before I go, I just want to make sure that I thank my Patreon patrons. So special thanks to my gold tier patrons, Tyler Bioshock Rodriguez, Ashley Gertensen, The Innocents, Hurtin Wade, Man vs. Moose, Bryce V, Cyber Montgomery Johnson, Jerker Rosen, Will S. Baker, Chasing Victory, Joshua Bale, Rich Christensen, Comrade Krieger, Dawson E, Zonk Breezes, Noah Ovens, David Perkins, Blackout the Door, Aaron Dane, The Lord of Oosberg, Sneaky Ninja, Noah5943, John Golly Jigsaw, Your Pal Mitch Yinzian, Big Ol' Bear, Ol' Hognose, Coco Rockout, Occam's Ghost. Also want to make sure that I thank my silver and bronze Patreon patrons. So thank you all for your support. Let's keep growing. Let's keep doing what we're doing. See you next time.